And if you're a leader, it's more important what you don't do than it is what you do. You need to give people enough rope to hang themselves.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Raven here. For those of you who may just be listening and didn't see the video, you may still understand by the quote I played at the beginning, but extra warning, this is a touchy subject. We are going to be discussing primarily suicide. Let me say, I am very disappointed with the way things like YouTube, Google, places like that are trying to hinder discussion of this kind of topic. They treat it as this touchy thing that shouldn't be shown. I highly disagree. I can understand some people being upset by it, disturbed by it, so I'm not going to force you, but you shouldn't be hindered either. This is important. Right now, it's getting bad. Suicide is growing. It's not helping at all that they're hiding it. People don't know about it. People aren't warned about it. People aren't aware. Too many people just assume it never happens to them. Or it's so rare, there's no way it could have an effect on them. People need to know. People need to understand. People need to realize it's there. Not just the ones who may eventually be driven toward it, but those who know them. And I'll tell you right now, Homestead Heritage only makes it worse. That quote by Ozzy, it's something that you normally wouldn't make a big deal out of, you wouldn't think a whole lot of. However, there's still things about it that just don't seem right. This situation is completely different. Having lost that one young lady at Homestead recently to suicide, not just that, but by the very thing he makes reference to, it's disgusting that he would use that. The real issue isn't just that people don't talk about it. It's that people learn to ignore it. People avoid it. And by doing that, if somebody is struggling with things and maybe pointing them in that direction, people are far less likely to notice because they're ignoring it. Because they've been learning to avoid it. Because they've been learning it's better not to think about that. But that's what they need to do. They need to be aware. They need to be alert. They need to be able to notice these things so that they can show that kind of care, worry, help the person needs. That is definitely not going to happen with the way our society's going. At Homestead, it's not going to bring the care you need. It's going to bring more of the judgment you need. What Ozzy is saying, what's really twisted here, is it's almost as though he is doing this to imply or create an excuse for what happened, and that the leaders didn't do anything about it. However, it's beyond that. That I wouldn't mind as much, because that's the thing. Usually you shouldn't take guilt for this stuff. Too many people do, and that's just not right. Here, it's different. What he says isn't just, don't prevent it or don't stop it. He says, give the extra rope. He is trying to promote, almost encouraging it. because he knows a lot of what they teach, a lot of what they do, drives that direction. That is despicable. Before I go any further, I want to give a little bit of background of what I've experienced, how I got into this topic, because this isn't just something I want to discuss because of what happened with Homestead. I have a little bit of experience with this. When I when I was younger, I went through a lot of trouble with my epilepsy, my seizures, and one thing that was really difficult was the medications because there's so many side effects both from medication and from stopping a medication. You'll have the withdrawal issues, you'll have the issues of the side effects, and they can both come at once because you'll be getting off one to get on another. And that can make it extra complicated. However, the worst is getting off it entirely. No meds. And I can say this by experience. About, well, now almost 15 years ago, I had what is called a temporal lobectomy. It's brain surgery where they go in, they test your brain, they check parts that may be causing a seizure or trouble, and just test to see how important is this portion of the brain? How much do you use it? How much of a necessity is it? And if they find there's kind of a way around it, if it's not too big of an issue to remove it, then you can go through the procedure. And what they do is, after finding where your seizures are sourced, where it starts, they go in and start surgery. But even as they do surgery, they still have to do tests to make sure, is it okay to remove what we're going to remove? And they eventually take out whatever part of your brain seems to be causing it. For me, it was about a cubic inch in my temporal lobe. This process itself took about 7.5, 8 hours. Afterward, they told me, you've got to sort of get off your drugs slowly, but not entirely. At the time, I was on 2 medications, both for my epilepsy. They told me one of them I could get off after about a year. Just slowly get off it. Then they told me after another year and a half or so, go ahead and lower the second med, but only in half. Don't get off it completely because that can cause issues. So they said just lower it down. This way, you won't have too many of the side effects anymore, and you won't go through the withdrawal or even have other issues that might come up. And so that was the plan. That was what I was going to do. However, about the same time, my insurance changed. I had to go to a different neurologist. When time came to get off, he took me off the first meds the way expected. Things went fine. But then, with the second med, he insisted I get off it entirely. Because of what I had been told, I didn't want to do it. But he insisted. And he gave some reasoning that, in hindsight, wasn't the best, but at the time was fairly convincing. So I went along with it. And the withdrawal hit. It brought back the seizures, but even worse than they were before. It caused blackouts that just came out of nowhere and would then start a seizure, which I was not used to. But the worst The worst was what would happen at night. I'd be laying in bed, and all of a sudden my entire body would cramp up. And it was painful. I wasn't able to do anything, and I'd go into absolute despair. Would lose all concept of time. To me, there was no future, period. I was just stuck in some kind of loop. And the one thing I could not get off my mind was that next to my bed was a little dresser, and in it I had a fairly good sized knife I could use to slit my throat. If I hadn't been cramping up enough that I couldn't do anything, those times could have very well led me to end it. The despair was overwhelming. After this passed, the withdrawal stopped. Seizures didn't. But those times of such complete despair finally backed off, didn't have them anymore. And I just felt like I wanted to help. I finally understood what it was like. I finally completely comprehended how bad it can get. Because from the medications, I'd known a bit of depression and things like that, but I'd never had it go to this extreme. And this time it was like, wow, people go through this. I gotta do something. So I started joining different support groups and things online to try to help people. And I got to. There were some that came close, very close. I had a couple different people where they'd call me, they'd be ready to end it, they'd have everything prepared, and last second they'd call me, and I'd have to talk them out of it. Get them to calm down, and eventually get them to start thinking clearly. And that's always what happens. Not thinking clearly. And it's that despair. That concept that there is no hope. There's no such thing. Where you're maybe stuck in a time loop. You're stuck somewhere where there's no way out, no escape. And that's it. All hope is gone. But when you go and you approach it with logic, that's not possible. And even if your beliefs, where you stand, drives you to the point where there is no future, there is no reason for anything, there is no purpose, there is still reason to hesitate once you think clearly. Because if you're in that kind of position, if you believe that kind of thing, and you're logical about it, you don't know that that's the case. And that's what despair is about. Making you convinced that there is no hope. But logically, there's always a chance. And that's what makes it so hard. That's what makes it so tough. And I believe that is part of what makes it so likely to happen in a place like Homestead Heritage. Because you can't think. All thinking is done for you. All beliefs, all reasoning, everything you come to accept is already determined for you. It's not your choice. Because of that, you're never going to think. And if you're never going to think and despair comes along, you have no chance of opposing it. And I have to admit, I cannot in any way blame them. I know the feeling. I know what it's like. And too many in a place like Homestead, even if they get the idea that maybe they can get out, maybe they can get free, maybe they can break those chains, doesn't change the fact that once they get out, they've got a whole nother world to face, and they're way behind. It's one of the saddest things. It's something you hear from everybody who gets out. Whether it be them or their children, there's a lot to catch up on, a lot to learn before you're going to be able to do much of anything in the world. And that makes it tough. One thing I have read from a couple people who know a bit about it, and I have to agree with for the most part. They've said that actual suicide is always forced by demonic. Basically, they say suicide comes when somebody's in despair, somebody's in depression, and something demonic forces it to the extreme. I will say I do see that as highly likely whenever it happens. But unlike what I've heard a couple places, I wouldn't say it's all the time necessarily. There's always going to be exceptions. Luckily, one place that said it, yeah, they admitted it, even though they'd never seen it, there probably are exceptions. And let me tell you right now, Homestead, from the testimonies I've heard, things I've seen, even what I've heard and seen in some of the videos, yeah, this may sound crazy, but there is the demonic in this. Very much so. It's how when people go there, they're blinded. It's how people may be hesitant of it, but as soon as they're there, they're trapped. It's why they're not thinking for themselves. And the suicide? Ooh, if you start thinking about getting out, you start going down that road of despair, depression, to where you're not gonna want to be part of it anymore, I can definitely see the demonic wanting to cause it. I can see suicide becoming a very, very useful tool to them. When you have this going on in a call like this, and you've got a leader who's going to come up and tell you to give them enough rope, don't just back off and not hinder it. Flat out give them what they need to do it. That is so disgusting and evil. But it also gives me more reassurance. I know what's making him think the way he thinks. I know it's guiding him down the roads he's going down. And it is definitely not of the Lord. I'll admit, ironically enough, that quote gives me the slightest shred of hope for Ozzy. Until now, I would have thought he's gone. He has completely turned to the enemy. He is completely following the enemy. He knows what he's doing. However, when he'll say something like this, I'm not so sure he knows what he's doing. I'm not so certain this really is him talking. And I have that slightest shred of hope, maybe he ever has a chance to think for himself, maybe he could come around. Doubtful, but it's there. And in that way, there's always a lot of hope for those who may want to commit suicide. One thing I've had to bring up and tell many people that people don't understand. There's an issue that causes suicidal thoughts, depression, despair, etc., that you'd never expect. If I told you somebody's suicidal, somebody's in complete depression, would you expect me to tell you they're very prideful? Would you expect me to tell you they're very selfish? Because I wouldn't. I don't think they are. But I think the major issue, they're extremely self-centered. Not in that they want everything for themselves. Not in that they're selfish. Not in that they hold themselves highly. But because they're so judgmental of themselves, they never look at anybody else. They spend all their time judging themselves. I've done this. And yeah, it is so self-centered. It puts your mind in a box where everything is revolving around you. And you feel not like you're the center of attention or you're the one that should be worshipped. No, you feel more like you're the one causing all the trouble and pain in the world. Satan can use either extreme: arrogance or shame and self-hatred. Either one. One thing the world's been saying lately that a lot of people frown on, and I frown on to an extent, is when they talk about loving yourself. The reason I don't like it is because they make it seem like that's more important. They push it a little far. But note what the Bible says. Loving others as you love yourself. Because you shouldn't put yourself above others. But at the same time, notice the other implication of this statement. Love them as you love yourself. If you hate yourself, that's a very low standard. And trying to treat them the way you treat yourself is not going to do any good. It's not saying don't love yourself. It's saying don't put yourself above others. You still need to have some of that. You still need to keep from hating yourself. Even though you should not put it first. You should not put yourself first. You still do need to care. And that's the problem of self-centered. You're putting yourself first. Whether in hatred or love, you're still putting yourself first. So either one is not right. And that's what happens with depression and suicide. You get so focused on you and your issues, your faults, your failures, that you lose all hope. Not because there's no hope out there, but because you're so focused on yourself and you see no hope for yourself. And so all hope is out of sight. So, is all you need to do get your focus on others? No. Is all you need to do to get rid of your self-hatred? No. You need both. If you try to get your focus off yourself, you got to put it somewhere else. If you put your focus on others, but you still hate yourself, looking at them is only going to make you feel like you are worse. That is why a place like Homestead Heritage can cause this. It is so much about pushing self-judgment. They are putting the whole body, including yourself, in that position of complete, absolute authority as Christ. When you do something wrong, when you feel all this shame, the very thing that makes suicide a sin is gone. The reason it's wrong is because you don't have that authority. You do not get to bring judgment upon yourself. But if you really believe that the body is truly Christ, that they each are Him, then they have that authority. Their teaching is promoting this. Very indirectly, very subconsciously, but it is. And when somebody is driven that direction, there is nothing in their teachings that is going to prevent it. They are giving them that extra rope. That's how evil this is. What these people need is true friends. People who truly love them. But not just that they do, but that they show it. They don't let fear overcome their love, because that's what happens in HH. That's what I've heard in so many testimonies. People talking about their children, talking about how they're forced to punish them so extremely out of fear. The fear overcomes the love. That's what these people need more of. That can be the start. That can be the beginning of what can get somebody out of suicide. It won't solve it, but it can be the start. Is that they see somebody else loves them, somebody else does not judge them the way they do. It is then that the very thing that causes it can work against itself. Not always, but I've seen it. Because ironically enough, once they see somebody else caring and loving and not caring about the issues they have with themselves, about the flaws they see, about the shame they have, when they see that, they can start judging their own judgment. They're seeing it's coming from somebody they feel is more trustworthy than themselves. Because of how they have looked down on themselves, seeing somebody else say differently than what they think, they can be more inclined to follow this other person than themselves. It's part of how they get drawn into a cult. But if they're with the right person, it can be what pulls them out this ditch they're in. It can be a long process, it can be slow, but that's what can do it. I have so many stories from different people I've talked to that I'll never be able to share, who have gone through these things, who've dealt with this stuff. And they're heartbreaking. But it's also very encouraging because I've seen them get through it. I've seen them hold their ground. or somebody else hold them up and pulling them along. It can happen. People can get pulled away from this stuff, but they can also get shoved into it. It's a battle. It's a real battle. And when you're in that state, when you're in a place of such despair that you can't even think, it is a perfect place to start losing all concept of yourself. That is another way Homestead promotes this. Stories I've heard and what I've experienced has shown this to me. When I went into those states where I felt like there was no time, I also could not figure out, who am I? What am I? How am I? How is it possible there's even a me? It didn't make sense to me anymore. I felt like I was an illusion, and the only way to break free of that illusion was to get rid of me. That's what Homestead was all about. Killing yourself without being born again. Sometimes taken too far, people can be driven to a point of taking it literally. Pray. Pray for these people, because they're in a place or their way of thinking, everything they're taught, everything they're told, puts them in a place where this can be so much easier to grab hold of them. You see it a lot in our world today. So many things that are taught now in our schools, that are promoted now in the media, can drive in this direction. It's a different way of doing it, but it still points to the same place. Because in our world, a lot of things we do with identity can cause them to lose themselves. It's different from Homestead, because in the way they do it with the world is more of trying to treat it like you're trying to find yourself, but by telling people that what they're doing is they're pushing people away from themselves and making them search everywhere they aren't. Homestead, on the other hand, is trying to tell them they need to get away from themselves. They're bringing the same results, but approached with a different mindset. And that's what it's all about. It ends up being all about losing yourself, getting rid of yourself, and then that going to the extreme, so that what they're teaching truly is giving them the rope. They need a rope, but not for that. It's so that we can help pull them out of that pit, pull them out of the despair they've been placed in. And all it takes is trying. They see that, they see your care. It'll give them more reason to try. And it has to be real, because they need to be able to believe it. In a place like this world, in a place like Homestead, they're used to lies. Nothing but lies. And they need to be able to get out of that. They need to be able to find a place where there's truth. They need to be able to know that there is such a thing. And it can take a lot for them to see it, because they're not used to looking at that. They're unfamiliar with it. They won't know what it is. They won't recognize it. But once they do, that can be a huge help. I want to say, everyone out there, anybody who watches this, if you know anybody who seems to be in that state of just depression, despair, maybe even going that far, don't try to fix their minds. Don't try to make them think straight. That can come later. Start by caring. Start by trying to get to know them. Start by showing them the way they see themselves is false, and that they're not seen that way by others. Because that's what they need. They need to know they're being told lies. They need to know that's the direction their mind is pointing them toward nothing but lies. That is why everything has to be the truth. Don't twist it. Don't just because you think it can solve something, tell a lie. Make sure it's honest. Yeah. People like this especially, don't push the wrong way. Don't let it become something of judging them. But definitely find the truths that help them. For those in Homestead Heritage, that can often mean first getting them out of this place that is telling them nothing but lies. That's what's so sad about it, is there's two battles in this. It's not just fighting these issues of depression and suicide. First, you're battling this very powerful, very intimidating cause of their despair. Then you face the despair itself. And even once they leave, Homestead does everything they can to keep that despair in them. It warns of this judgment that's coming their way, the curses that are going to be on them, etc. Because of that fear. Too many of the people that cause it don't stop to realize that fear, pushed so extreme, brings that despair. They are handing them the rope. I pray we can get people out of this place. God bless.